Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 7th edition of Encora Talks. Today, our topic is effectively managing software development partner transitions. Our speaker is Eric Vargas. Eric is a product engineering leader with over 20 years of experience in the technology industry. He co leads Encora's product engineer technology practice and has broad experience aligning technology solutions to business strategy. Eric works with Encora's teams to engage new customers and support ongoing client engagements. His industry experience and expertise include fast growing tech, retail, health tech, media, and education. He also leads efforts to design future state capabilities to enhance Encora's internal organizational processes. Eric holds a master's degree in industrial engineering and a bachelor's degree in software engineering from the Instituto Tecnológico de Costa Rica. Hello, Eric. Welcome, and thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Daniela. Thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you everyone for being here. Okay, hi everyone. Let's start with a little bit of context, and basically, in talking specifically about transitions, it's not just transitions of partner or software development partners, but anything that requires a change in the organization means that there needs to be a transition. Especially in the industry that we are, digital transformation and digital product engineering are the two main components that industries or organizations look for to leverage partner transitions. So it's common in our industry to have these kind of processes, and we see this happening all the time. We see organizations reach out in trying to come up with a better solution, looking for specialized services or looking for a reason or a solution to scale their operations. Anything that requires change in the organization or requires something more specialized in terms of services, it will require a transition. It will require some work to be done. It's not just about technical change. It's not just about technical operations. It's about something else, and that's one of the reasons that why we're here. And one of the things that I will try to do is try to talk to you about our experience working with transitions. Throughout the years, and try to at least identify what are the reasons that organizations usually look for when they're trying to switch a partner, or and the key takeaways. What's important? What are the challenges? What you need to consider when you're looking for a new partner, and that's important. So that's basically what I will be talking. It's based on our experience, so also feel free to ask questions at the end. And something that I will start with is that it's very common in our industry to see transitions happening all the time. Sometimes it starts with just one person transition, and sometimes it's a team, it's a whole team, or sometimes it's the whole operation. What are the reasons for organizations looking for transitioning this kind of effort? Sometimes there's not enough value being provided, especially when there are organizations and partnerships that are or have evolved through many years. We have seen and we have had examples where we have clients that have the same partner for over 10 years. And even though that builds some trust between the two parties, sometimes they're usually in a status quo state where new things, or when you need to innovate, or when you notice that the organization needs to take to another level, then it's not enough. So that's probably one of the main reasons why sometimes organizations look for another vendor. Sometimes there is some evolution that needs to be made. There are new markets an organization need to target. There are new processes. There are new needs in terms of business, especially when we're talking about, like, for example, cloud. The whole transitioning from on-premises architectures to cloud requires a new set of expertise, a new set of teams, and those also are reasons why some organizations usually look for some specialized partners, because the current ones are focused on maintaining the operations, and that operation is the plateau where they're at right now, and looking for more specialized services or looking for a new ways to do things. It's usually painful. It's usually it's not part of the capabilities of the current vendor. Other pains that we have experience with in terms of transitions is that expectations are usually not being met in terms of the value being provided. Performance, for example, usually there is some kind of scalability problem. You need to target new services. You need to create new value for end customers, and the current team is focused on the operation. So there are not enough hands, there are not enough team members or new team members to address new needs. And that usually means we need to search for another partner. We need to search for another team that can help us not only address the current needs, but also build on top of what we have. And that's another reason. Lately, we have seen a lot of geopolitical reasons, and also another key driver for transitions is acquisitions. A lot of companies in our industry are driven by acquisitions, their growth, and also growing requires more hands, requires more capacity to address specific needs in terms of integrating the different systems within the acquisition and also driving the business forward. So we have identified 5 specific reasons why organizations usually look for partner transitions. Number 1 is offshore to nearshore. And what we call offshore is when we have teams working in different time zones with over 8 hours of difference. And I mean, when you don't have around the clock operations, it's not sustainable to have teams working early in the morning, working late at nights to have meetings and have that kind of overlap between the teams. There are large portions of the day where the teams will be working in isolation, and communications will not be as smooth as we would want. Sometimes you hit a block and things need to be addressed, and working sessions are usually the way to go. So number 1 reason is that we need teams to work closely. We need operations to be maintained and communication to be improved. So that's number 1 reason. Number 2, performance. Performance can suffer, and by performance, I'm talking about team productivity and what we call usually team performance. Of course, there are a lot of reasons why some teams can suffer from performance or productivity issues. And I'm not trying to dig into a specific individual performance issues, but as a team, sometimes there are issues that are part of the evolution of the operation or evolution of the same system. We have seen examples where there are teams for building solutions, especially on the startup industry, where you need to build something quick, you need to build something fast, and time to market is important. So after 1 year, after 2 years, or working on something very specific, you end up with a solution that is probably suffering on some performance issues, performance in the technical side, but the team is also focused on maintaining that. There are some architecture decisions that have to be made, and it's impacting productivity. A lot of manual processes, and a lot of technical intervention, and that's usually something that or customers also look for a new set of eyes that can just take a look at what has been built and provide a new path going forward. Number three is scalability or capacity problems. As I mentioned before, and especially during acquisition efforts, and when customers are trying, or organizations are trying to address new needs or target new markets, then there's a need for more hands. Or industry is suffering from a lack of professionals in getting some new team members to build on something. Organizations are usually focus their teams on maintaining the existing operation, and they don't have the capacity to allocate people to new efforts. That's another specific reason, and very valuable for the context that we're in right now. And usually requires a new team coming in, not just taking over, but transitioning whatever is in place right now and build on top of that. Number four, it's about risk. Some organizations are looking to reduce risk in terms of business continuity or how they support their business. There was this scenario where we had a customer that approached us and say, I have built this system, and their core system was built in-house because it was a very specific solution for insurance industry, and they have built this in-house, but it was built by two people company, a two people job, two people development partner. And there was a risk after many years, let's say it was about 8 years, after 8 years of successful growth and evolution in a great product in place, there was a risk. What happened to this partner if they go away? What happened if it was funny because the customer said, what happens if he's struck by a bus and he dies? Yes, there's a risk. There's a risk because no one knows what's going on. No one knows how the system is built. There's not enough documentation. Everything is in their heads. So there was a huge risk for their business on how to continue operations if something happened. So that's a great example. I mean, we can scale that example to more mature or more large organizations, but at the end, it becomes a risk. It becomes a necessity to be to trust that the business can continue, even though the existing partner or the existing team that is in charge of the operations of a specific system, especially if it's a critical or core system, goes away. Another reason, and not least important, is vendor consolidation. Many organizations, especially large organizations, tend to have a lot of partners within their ecosystem. So they have, for example, if they have 24/7 or around the clock operations in the technical side, they need someone to take care of their operations when no one is working on this side of the world, and that requires different vendors. Sometimes they have a specific need, for example, on cloud operations, on-call, and monitoring, and alerting, things like that. And they have another partner taking care of the development efforts. Sometimes they also suffer from integration on these different teams. So they are looking for integrating their their partnership with a single vendor because it's easier to manage, it's easier to communicate, it's easier to integrate with all involved parties. So instead of dealing with 5, 6, 7, 10 different partners on the technology side, they will just need to deal with 1 or 2. So it's another reason we have seen in the industry why they're looking for transitioning efforts. how we do this at Encora, and let me tell you that this is a process that we have matured over the years. We have over 15 years in working in specifically dealing with transitions, and we have built what we call the transition framework. It's a process that has artifacts, that has methodologies, that has especially best practices. It's not just about technical governance. It's also culture. It's also team dynamics. It's also understanding the politics around the organization and the relationships between the different parties in the same organization. How we do this? We start with a phase that we call the discovery phase. And this discovery phase is basically a period of time where all involved parties share information. And this is basically an understanding of how things are laid out, not just on the technical side. It has to do with understanding the technology ecosystem, infrastructure, software solutions. We can dig a little bit and talk about source code, the software structure, relationships. We take a look at architecture diagram. We take a look at technical documentation. We take a look at everything that is in internal wikis, conferences, and internal documentation. We also take a look at governance processes. Who's responsible of what? The different phases on the delivery pipeline. It's not just who's responsible of driving the business requirements, who's responsible of writing the code, who promotes that code between stages. If it is automatic, if it's a manual process, is that process documented somewhere? Who does that? The QA process, who deals with the QAs? It is a separate team? Is it part of the responsibilities of the delivery team? What about security? What about the management? What about the methodologies? If it's an agile, if it's Scrum, if it's something else. So we do this discovery by getting into working sessions. And one of the things that we have learned during the past 2-3 years is that what we can get the most value of is from face-to-face working sessions. Discovery processes usually take from 3 to 4 weeks. This process and this framework for transition allow us to be very predictable in terms of the process, so we can come up with a specific time frame that we can have results visible to everyone. So when I say face-to-face is better, it's not that remote work cannot be done. We have learned that. We conducted several discovery and transition processes during the COVID pandemic. And although it was successful, it took a little bit longer. It didn't take 4 weeks. It probably took between 4 to 8 weeks, because it's different when you're the face-to-face work. It usually happens on the customer premises. So we go on site. We go with the team in charge of the discovery phase, and we do these working sessions with all involved stakeholders, with the infrastructure manager, with the delivery manager, with the QA manager, with everyone that part of the process on the different teams. And we do that probably in a week, and then come back and finish the discovery process results. So we have identified the specific outputs for the discovery process, and we work on that. And then at the end, we just do our working sessions where we present the results, present the plan that we will execute during the rest of the transition process, and we agree on next steps. So what are the outputs of this discovery process? It's basically some documentation, and it's important documentation. We document whatever is missing from the organization. Sometimes it is a software architecture document where we laid out what we find during these sessions. if it's not available already. And the most important part of the discovery process is that we outline a plan to execute the transition process. One of the key areas of the next steps on the transition is the knowledge transfer. So everything around a transition is related to knowledge transfer. I mean, going in, taking a look at some software, try to identify how it is structured, learn the source code. That's easily done for technical teams. What is not easy is to infer the decisions that made the team get there. It's not easy to identify what are the architecture decisions that are not documented. It's not easy to understand or to have a complete visibility of the rest of the ecosystem. What business areas are impacted by the systems that were built? So how the process is executed, who's responsible. So that knowledge transfer is critical and is something that we identified during the discovery process in how we will do that. Important to mention is that in this kind of transition, sometimes we will have the support of the old partner. Sometimes we will not have that support. I mean, it's not a good. It's sometimes, and depends on the partner, that it's not they will not take the news very well. I mean, telling them that they will be replaced by another partner, it can have two results. Either you have the partner collaborate during the transition, or they will not collaborate. And we have had cases where they just disappear the next day. And I mean, you made the communication that they will be replaced, and next day no one is there, especially when there are teams or remote teams. So they just close access, they just disappear, and we need to manage that. So that risk is part of what we also assess during the discovery process. So knowledge transfer then can have two different paths. Number one, if we have collaboration from everyone, and number two, if we don't have the other partner being part of the knowledge transfer. It depends on how much documentation the organization has on their internal systems or wikis, and the availability of the people that has the knowledge. It also has to do what is the proper team that will take over the operations. And I just said takeover, but transitions are not usually a takeover. There was this scenario 4 years ago where we had this customer that reached out, and they had a partner that they were focused on maintaining the existing operation. There was a system they have built for the last 2 years, and they were trying to get that on a stable release. It has some performance problems, but they had another need. They need to scale. They had to start working on new features for new customers, but they don't have the bandwidth. That means that they had a need for a new partner to come in and work side by side with the existing team. And that's a transition. That's a transition because it required a discovery. It required us to come and understand and learn how everything was, learn how the team worked, the team dynamics, how their culture, and then we needed to execute some kind of knowledge transfer, because whatever they have built, it was our base or our foundation to work on something else on top of that. So we executed that transition. It was a very good experience, because there was these two different partners. Some will say competition, but we managed to create a culture to collaboratively work in favor of the customer goals, and everyone understood that. We executed the discovery on site. We bring together everyone to a central office, the other partner, the customer, and our team, and we work together to get that result. So knowledge transfer is important. It means that we need to have the specific people, high-profile people. And then once we execute knowledge transfer, which is no more than reading more documentation, having working sessions with the specific people, but what's important here is that you need to have some guidelines. You need to have a set of expected deliverables and results for the knowledge transfer. And important is that you need to have, and we take a top-down approach, because there will be a lot of details that you will not be able to capture in the 4 weeks or 2 weeks period. During the discovery, one of the results of the discovery is that knowledge transfer, we will have a plan for knowledge transfer. We will say, this will take 2 weeks, this will take 2 months, or this will take 6 months, and this is how we will do the knowledge transfer. In parallel, or after the knowledge transfer, we execute what we call the team ramp up. So the whole transition process is usually executed by what we call a core team. And that core team is very skilled people with high profile. And by that, I mean solutions or software architect, and 1, 2, or 3 software leads they will be the leads for the team once we ramp up the rest of the team members. Sometimes we will need business analysts. Sometimes we will need UX, UI specialists. Sometimes we will need DevOps or cloud experts. It will depend on what we discovered during early discussions before the discovery. So discovery will be executed by a team of at minimum 2 people, and it can be up to 5 people. It's usually a small team because we emphasize here in getting the value out as soon as possible. In the knowledge transfer, it's important to have the leads, because they will be the people that will lead the rest of the team during the onboarding. So how you set up the environment, what are the involved components, working sessions to explain, to walk them through the different solutions and what we have learned. So we take that out of the customer responsibility and we own that process. And then we start growing the team, and that will depend on what we discovered during the early phases. It's important to mention that this transition process is in charge, or is responsibility of what we call the transition governance group. And this transition governance is no more than responsible or sponsored from the customer side. We will have what we call the core team on our side, but we will also have specialized people, and we also have a governance framework that supports all these processes. And everything during the whole process of the transition, we will have direct communication and periodic communication with the customer sponsor. What are the customer sponsor? Well, whoever is on the customer side that is leading this effort. It can be a group of people, it can be just one person. It will depend on the complexity, it will depend on the organization. We will have a strategic committee, which is basically the people that is in charge of making sure that the transition is being executed as expected. All risks are being addressed, and we will not be deviating from the plan. We will have the operational team, which is the team that works on a daily basis. They will be the ones having the daily meetings or the working sessions, working on the deliverables, working on producing the results that we have identified. If you can see, we will have the same people, or we will have one person on both teams, the architect, which is the person that will lead the effort. Or the transition. We can have a scrum master, we can have a project manager, but they will work hand by hand in getting this done. the reason why the Encora architect is the lead of the transition process is because he needs to make sure that everything is aligned, from business to technology. He can talk bits and bytes, he can talk business, he can deal with business people, he can deal with technical people. And that person will make sure that everything is executed as expected. We have a set of SLAs, we have a set of standards, processes, best practices, guidelines, regulations that supports our process, and that guarantees that this process is successful. Not always everything is flying colors, of course. I mean, there are some complexities that we usually need to navigate during transition process, and there are some challenges that we face. I'll tell you about two challenges. There are, of course, many others, but the two most critical challenges that we have faced and that we face on every transition. Number one is the existing partner not collaborating in the effort. So that's always a risk. That's always a concern before we engage in this type of process. And it needs to be handled appropriately. Communication, everything goes with the customer sponsor because they are the ones that hold the trust relationship with the other partner. So how we do this? I'll give you an example. How we approach other partners during early engagements. For example, the discovery. During the discovery, it's usual that the other partner doesn't know that they're being replaced or that there is another partner coming in and working side by side with them. So it's common for organizations to execute audits on their systems, on their culture, on their processes. So we come in as a consultant agency to execute an audit, to execute a security audit, to execute a source code quality audit, to execute an infrastructure audit. And we execute the discovery phase under that model, right? So there is no risk for the other vendor or the other partner to feel threatened by someone else trying to replace them. During the discovery phase, then we will see what would be the best approach to communicate this or to address this concern. It's not usual that the customer knows beforehand or before starting the discovery process how the other partner will react. So that's why we usually take this approach during the early phases of the transition process. The second challenge is documentation. It's not usual to have documentation available. Sometimes there is documentation, but it's old, and it's common for organizations also to have documentation, but not having efforts to continually update and evolve the documentation on the same way the systems are evolving. So it's hard. It's hard to find organizations that have everything documented, from processes, from systems, from technical decisions. And I'm not saying it's usual, but there are the two. I will say that 80% of the transition processes that we have taken are missing a lot of documentation. One thing to mention is that transition processes they're usually occurring on a context where the organization is evolving or is taking the next step in terms of scalability, in terms of building something else. So they're in a position where they have grown too fast, and by growing too fast, they have neglected, if I may say, to focus on building the same level of documentation as they're building on their software solutions. So that's important to mention. Key takeaways. So for experience and try to sum up everything I have discussed today. Number one, partner transitions are usual. So this is not new. What is important to mention here is that there's a way to accomplish successful partner transitions. And how to do that, it requires proper structure, and it requires a repeatable process, and someone that you can measure, that you can encapsulate in a process, and you can easily manage. Transitions are risky because of what I just said. Are risky because there's not always the same level of collaboration when you know that someone is replacing you. And they're also risky because you have someone else new to the organization that is coming in, and it's taking over operations that they're not used to, that are new to them. And if there's not enough documentation, there's not enough know-how, there's no been a lot of time to get used to how things are done, then it can provide some resistance from the existing organization, or create a set of mistakes from the new partner if they don't have enough information to address the transition. Everything boils down to collaboration between all involved parties, not just the existing or old vendor. It also requires a lot of involvement from the sponsor on the organization, and also a lot of focus and diligence from the organization that is coming in. Proper governance means proper structure and the right people that is able to make decisions. Sometimes we identify risks during the discovery process that needs to be addressed, and we need to have the people in that governance structure that is able to make decisions and act quick, because usually transitions occur in short periods of time. Choosing a new partner is also important. It means that if you're going through a transition, it means that you have a need, that there's something in the operations that is causing problems, that is preventing the organization from evolving, and you don't want to be in that same position in the next couple of years. You will want a relationship with a new partner that can evolve through many years, because transitions, I just said, they're risky. They require a lot of effort, and you don't want to be in transitions every year. Number 6, and one of the things that we have learned, is that face-to-face discoveries, and this is the first phase, yields better results. Better results, not in terms of the quality of the outcome, not in terms of how successful the transition is, but specifically on the duration of the transition. Doing remote transitions will take more time. It can be double the time. So if we can execute a discovery phase, which is the first phase of the transition, in 4 weeks, doing remotely, it could take 8 weeks. It could take 6 weeks. And there's one specific reason. And we've seen all of this during the pandemic, is that doing working sessions online, it's not the same as working sessions on a meeting room. On a meeting room, you will have the coffee, you will have the cookies, you can stand up, you can walk, you can have those informal spaces where you can get more information out of. Being in front of a computer by more than 1 hour or 2 hours, it's a load for the people. So that's why face-to-face is recommended, not critical. That's all I had to share about successfully managing partner transitions. As I said at the beginning, thank you for being here. And I guess that we have some time for questions, right, Danny?
Hi, Eric. Yes, you're right. Thank you so much for sharing all this valuable information with us. And as you just said, we're ready now to start with our Q&A. So the first question we have here is, how do you approach the discovery phase? Can you elaborate or provide a real case scenario to better understand what activities are involved and how it is executed?
Of course, yeah, that's a great question because the discovery phase is, I will say, the most important phase of the transition, and it's mainly because it's where everything is laid out. The plan for the transition is built on the discovery phase. So how we do the discovery phase, we have a set of artifacts that we leverage for the discovery phase. One of them is an agenda. I mean, it's very straightforward. You can say it's just an agenda, but it's an agenda that outlines what is the information that we need to gather during the discovery? What are the expected results? Or what is the people that needs to be involved in those sessions? And what is the expected duration of each session? Why is this important? Because those artifacts are shared before we start the discovery process. It allows the customer, it allows us also to plan ahead the discovery phase. So I just mentioned a few minutes ago that we prefer face-to-face discovery process. That means that our team, a set of 2-3 people, will be on site on the customer side. They will reserve a meeting room for a whole week. In that whole week, it means that probably mornings will be full of meetings and working sessions with different stakeholders. Everyone is busy, right? Everyone on the customer side needs a job to take care of. So that means that beforehand, they will have the agenda. They will know who's needed when and what is the information that we will be asking or needing during that session. So it allows proper structure. It allows proper governance because, I mean, a visit is not just to know each other, it's to get results as effectively as possible. So that means an effective use of everyone's time and guarantee that by the end of that visit, we will have the input we need to continue working on the plan. So that's like the first phase of the discovery process, an on-site visit. If we do this remotely, then there will be these working sessions, but spaced throughout a period of probably 2 weeks. It's not the same, as I mentioned, being in an office, but than doing online sessions. Then after this first phase of information gathering and talking, interviewing people, then our team starts to reviewing deeply the information and in more detail, asking questions, because when you're in a working session and you're asking questions, that you're absorbing a lot of information. There's a lot of information to be absorbed. And then there's another phase where our team digests all that information. When you're digesting, when you are thinking in detail about the specific piece of information that you have in front of you, then more questions might arise. So there's a second phase on the discovery process that we take that information on our own and we start to review. And based on that information, the questions that we have, we laid out the plan. And that's like the third phase of the discovery, is where we start producing the outputs of the discovery. There are 3 specific outputs of every discovery process. Yeah. I mean, I will say the architecture document. The architecture document is not always an architecture document. It's usually because there's not enough documentation on the architecture side, on the customer side. So we create an architecture document starting from high-level architecture diagrams, relationships, code audits to identify security risk or accessibility needs or something like that. So we create that document. We also create a roadmap, not only for the rest of the transition, but also for the team ramp up. And we also identify what is the team that is required to either take over the operations or work in parallel with the other partner. Those are the 3 outputs that we deliver after the discovery phase. Hope that answered the question.
Thank you so much, Eric. The second question we have for you is, how long does it usually take to fully execute a transition, from the transition start until the ramp up team is fully productive?
That's a tough question. And there's an easy answer. It depends. And let me elaborate on that a little bit. So it depends on the complexity of the transition. It depends on the complexity of the organization, because sometimes you will need to transition the whole operation. It can take a lot of time. So it can take up to 6 months. We have experiences where we transition a complete team, a whole team that will take over the operations and also the ownership of the core system of the organization. So starting with the discovery, knowledge transfer, team ramp up. When you will say everyone is comfortable with the work on a daily basis, it could take up to 6 months. But we have had cases where, in a couple months, 1 month is very aggressive, because usually the discovery process can take up to 4 months. So just the understanding, 4 months, no, 4 weeks. Just the understanding and the discovery phase can take up to 4 weeks. But after that, 4 more weeks, we have seen teams that are very, or starting to add value. It depends on, and there's a catch. That's why the discovery process is important. And I mentioned the last question, identifying the right people, the right roles for the team. It will guarantee that you will have a productive team as soon as possible. One important thing to mention is that the ramp up, we do the ramp up also on a top-down approach. We start engaging and ramping up high-profile people, senior software engineers, and then because they will be the ones that will own areas of the ecosystem much easier, and they will also help other members when they onboard to be productive as soon as possible. So it will depend.
Okay, thank you so much, Eric, again. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. Please keep an eye out for more webinars that we will be hosting soon. And we also invite you to watch the recorded webinars we already have posted on talks.encora.com or on our YouTube channel. Thank you so much, all.
Thank you.